One of the most familiar faces at Open Championships is always Gary Player. The three-time Claret Jug winner returns every year without fail to watch new players add to the extraordinary history that he is such an integral part of. He played alongside some of the greatest names ever to have played the sport, so who better to ask about their Open memories than the Black Knight himself?
Where the Open is very different to, say, Wimbledon tennis. When Wimbledon tennis, if I play against Djokovic, I play under the same conditions. When you play in the Open, first of all, you've got to beat 156 players in the tournament. And secondly, I can play in the morning, the most beautiful morning, and the afternoon it's windy and it's pouring with rain, and you can feel, you could be inclined to feel sorry for yourself, and you're out of the tournament. So the challenge of the Open Championship is beyond one's imagination, far exceeds any other tournament as a challenge.
Ben Hogan of the United States. The huge gallery saw that the holder, Bobby Locke of South Africa, wasn't going to win it again this year. And when Hogan drove off near the end of his final round, they followed up to see just how he was going to finish.
There's nobody living today that can hit the ball anything like Ben Hogan. For that matter, I don't think there's anybody playing today that had the control of a golf ball like Lee Trevino. We never played on beautiful putting green surfaces, never had fairways like this, never had grooves on the club. We never had a ball that goes 50 yards further. We never had rakes to rake all the bunkers or a machine to rake all the bunkers. So it was a different era, and you can't compare different eras. But Ben Hogan, you can.
After rounds of 73, 71 and 70, he had this putt for a 67. Oh, no. Oh, if that gentleman would only move, we could see Hogan's last stroke, the stroke that gave him a 68, a total of 282.
It's quite sad for me because he comes over here, he plays one time and he wins. But he had to go to war in the height of his career, then had an accident, so for 32 major championships, he never played in his prime, and he won 9 majors, so he might have won way, I think he'd have won way more than Jack Nicklaus. But I've got to tell you the fascinating thing about the Open and major championships. Jack Nicklaus won 18. He was either first, second or third in 53 major championships. I won 18 major championships, counting senior and regular. I was second 7 times. Only your wife and your dog know who finishes second. But that's 7. This man had 19 seconds in major championships. That's food for thought. But I tell you, one of the things that fascinated me, Tony Jacklin came along, Britain was starving for a champion. People, the younger players today, they've forgotten this because they weren't around or they didn't know about it. Completely naive of the situation. Britain needed a major championship winner. The last man to do it was Max Faulkner at Port Rush. And Tony Jacklin came along at the right time and won the Open Championship at Lytham, hitting this marvellous drive down the last hole. He then goes across to America and wins the American Open, which was just the right time. And I find this fascinating because my dear friend Bob Charles is given a knighthood, and he won the British Open, or the Open once, and yet Tony Jacklin, a British citizen, did this magnificent effort and wasn't given a knighthood. He was given an OBE or a CBE, whatever title he was given. To this day, I'm flabbergasted because that was a monumental effort on his behalf and at the right time. And then he went on to captain the Ryder Cup and spurred on a nation. He was a very dynamic guy. So I've always sort of felt that he got the raw end of the stick. I hope one day they'll knight him. The saddest thing that I ever saw in the Open was Van der Velde at Carnoustie. And I stood at that tournament in 1968. I was one shot ahead of 5 players, of which I was playing with Jack Nicklaus, and he was one of them. And we came to the 14th hole, which is known as the Spectacles. And the wind was blowing and the flag was fluttering in the breeze, and I hit a 3-wood that far from the hole, which enabled me to go on and win. And I had a 2-shot lead over Jack Nicklaus playing the last hole. I took an iron off the tee because all I wanted to do was get a 5. There's water on the right, high rough on the left, and Van der Velde, what he did was quite, you can't get over it. I mean, and he never got over it. So that was one of the saddest things I've seen.
To many, the Open is the ultimate prize in golf, a true test of skill in some of the most testing of conditions. Those who cope go into history. Those that don't sink without trace, and those that win multiple times become legends. But we wanted to know, of his 3 fantastic wins, which is the Black Knight's favourite?
Obviously my first, because in 1959 I was the youngest man to win the Open at 23, and I needed the money, and my wife was travelling from South Africa with our baby, who I couldn't afford to fly back and be with. So she arrives and I go to Muirfield and I shoot 284 with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, only 4 shots worse than Mickelson shot last year with very little wind or no wind. And the rough was higher and the wind was stronger and the course was in terrible shape, and I was only 4 shots worth with all that inferior equipment. So that sticks in my mind to say, well, I wasn't too bad a player.